very difficult. I didn't expect it to see that would be the last time that anybody saw her alive. To see that, there's really no words.
Baby girl was mommy. I never thought in a million years that I would have to go a whole year without seeing your face, your smile, hearing your laugh. Whatever situation you're in, just know that we're waiting for you and we're looking for you, and we won't stop. We won't stop. I promise you that until we get you back home. I need you to be strong. I'm going to pray for you every second of the day.
4.5 years ago, Lashaya Stein went missing.
Surveillance footage caught her walking down the street. 4 years later, we still have no idea where she was going or why she never returned home.
She was 16 at the time.
In America, when a girl goes missing, the world is supposed to stop. Reporters flood in. Helicopters hover. Search dogs scour the woods. Her name becomes a hashtag. Her face is plastered across headlines. But what if that girl is black? No Amber Alert, no round-the-clock news coverage, no nationwide outcry. Just silence. For centuries, black women and girls had vanished from southern plantations, from bustling city streets, from forgotten highways, without a trace. Many were never even reported missing. Some were called runaways. Others were blamed for their own disappearance. Most were simply erased. This isn't just a crisis. It's a pattern, a buried history that stretches back generations. And what you're about to see isn't just about those who vanished. It's about the systems that let them disappear. The families left behind in the silence that still echoes today. Why were their names never trending? Why were their stories never told? And what if this silence was never accidental?
According to census data, nearly 40% of missing persons in the United States are persons of color, yet African Americans make up only 13% of the population.
This image of Akia Eggleston.
It wasn't really a pressing matter to the police department. To see that would be the last time that anybody saw her alive.
Someone just did it and got away with it.
It's really no words. It was a young girl who was murdered and her body was left on 295.
Whatever situation you're in, just know that we're looking for you and we won't stop until we get you back home.
They weren't just missing, they were erased. It began long before the 911 call, before missing posters and databases, before the word quote-unquote missing even meant what it means today. In the 1800s, black women didn't go missing in the eyes of the law. They escaped as property. Fugitive ads in colonial newspapers described them with chilling precision. Light mulatto girl, about 20, reward offered. These weren't alerts born of concern. They were hunting instructions. No mention of safety, no appeal to humanity, just a transaction to be returned. When Odney Judge ran from the Washingtons in 1796, her notice described her physical features in detail, not to aid in her rescue, but to ensure her capture. She had no name in most records, no dignity, only a reward of $10, and a threat to any ship captain who might help her. Her story is not unique. Throughout the antebellum period, enslaved black women disappeared constantly, running from abuse, sold without notice, or killed without consequences. Their losses were mourned only by families who had no legal rights to grieve. Even freedom didn't change everything. After emancipation, black families printed information wanted ads in black-run papers, like the Christian Recorder. Mothers searching for daughters sewed away in childhood, sisters looking for brothers who never returned. These ads rarely crossed into white newspapers. The white press didn't see these girls as missing. Their pain didn't fit the narrative. And that pattern of indifference, it didn't stay in the 1800s. It evolved with the country, quieter, more bureaucratic, but just as devastating. By the early 1900s, the Great Migration began. Millions of black families left the Jim Crow South for northern cities, Detroit, Chicago, New York. But among the hope and movement, many vanished. A young girl from Mississippi might disappear in Harlem in 1925, last seen headed to a factory job or cleaning a white woman's home. Her mother back home writes to police, gets no answer. There are no search parties, no leads, only silence. In Atlanta, 1911, something even more sinister emerged. That year, black women began turning up dead. Throats slashed, skulls fractured, over 20 victims. Most were maids, laundresses, everyday workers. The press reluctantly dubbed it the Atlanta Ripper. But the murders were ignored until Sadie Hawley, a young laundry worker, was killed. Her death finally made the front page of the Atlanta Constitution, not because she was black, but because the brutality became impossible to ignore. Even then, Reverend Henry Hugh Proctor begged police to hire black detectives. Black residents didn't trust white officers, and they had good reason not to. The Ripper case would drag on. No one was ever caught. Police arrested several suspects. None stuck. Meanwhile, black women kept dying. Some believed there was more than one killer. But what's clear is this: had those victims been white, the response would have been different. That contrast will echo again decades later with the Freeway Phantom in Washington, D.C. and the Boston Stride Wright murders. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because before all that, there was another form of vanishing, the quiet disappearance. No bodies, no killers, just girls who didn't come home. One such case in 1932, barely a blip on record, unfolded in Harlem. While the nation was gripped by the Lamberg baby kidnapping, leading to new federal laws and 24/7 news coverage, a black child also went missing in Cleveland, Ohio. No alert, no banner headlines. In June of 1937, skeletal remains were discovered under the Loren Carnegie Bridge, wrapped in a rotting burlap sack. Alongside the bones was an old newspaper, dated June 1936, suggesting the victim had been killed about a year earlier. Investigators noted distinctive features. The victim was petite, under 5 feet tall, with quote-unquote black curly and kinky hair, and her skull showed a wide nasal aperture and prominent jaw structure, forensic clues that indicated she was likely an African-American female. Additionally, her teeth bore extensive gold dental work, an important identifying trait. Because no name was initially known, authorities dubbed her, quote-unquote, Cleveland Jane Doe. However, leads soon pointed to a possible identity. Police received a letter referencing a missing woman named Rose Wallace, a 40-year-old black woman who had vanished from Cleveland's East Side in August 1936. Rose Wallace's son came forward to say he was certain the remains were his mother, recognizing the gold crowns in the jaw. Detectives pursued this lead. Rose's last known whereabouts were investigated, and even her dentist was sought. Unfortunately, the dentist who had done her dental work had died by then, making a definitive match difficult. For the family of Rose Wallace and the black community in Cleveland, the tragedy highlighted the area's teeniest justice for missing black women. Rose's disappearance was not front-page news in 1936, but her presumed fate became a footnote in the larger Torso murder saga. The case shows that even when black victims were part of a notorious investigation, they remained largely nameless. Just a mother, a few flyers, in a city that turned the page. In that same decade, Ida B. Wells warned the country. Black women weren't just invisible in life, they were invisible in death.
My great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, was a journalist, a civil rights activist, a suffragist who fought for freedom, justice, and equality. This was an image of her when she's older, and these are some of her more famous quotes. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them.
She documented lynchings of women like Eliza Woods in 1886, dragged from jail and murdered, her corpse displayed as a warning. There was no investigation, just a false accusation and execution by mob. Even when black women died violently, their stories rarely surfaced outside the black press. Meanwhile, white women who went missing in the wilderness or fell into danger made national news. The assumption? Innocent in need of rescue. For black girls, the assumption was never innocence. It was adultification. Seeing them as older, less vulnerable, had hardened into policy. Its roots? Slavery, a time when black girls were property, not people. By the 1930s, families organized their own searches, knowing the system wouldn't. By the 1940s, black women and girls had been vanishing in America for over a century, but the system still hadn't learned to care. Their faces weren't on milk cartons, their names rarely hit the news, and in the shadow of Jim Crow, when a black girl disappeared, law enforcement didn't see a child in danger, they saw a runaway. The label came fast, sometimes within hours, and once it did, the urgency died. In cities like Baltimore, Detroit, and Los Angeles, black families filed reports, begged for help, and handed out flyers. But again and again, officers offered the same response. She probably left on her own, even when there was no evidence of that. In 1971, Carol Spinks, a 13-year-old from Southeast Washington, D.C., went to the store to buy groceries. She never came home. 6 days later, her body was found by the side of I-295. She was the first victim of the serial killer later known as the Freeway Phantom. Over the next 16 months, 5 more black girls, ages 10 to 18, were abducted, assaulted, and dumped near D.C. highways. At first, the cases were barely connected. Police didn't see a pattern, but when a chilling note was left on the body of one victim, Brenda Faye Crockett, in 1971, it became clear these killings weren't random.
Someone just did it and got away with it. And maybe they didn't get away with it, is what I'm hoping.
Still, urgency lagged. Detectives launched a task force, even brought in the FBI. But the case lost momentum when Watergate erupted. Federal attention shifted. evidence vanished. And to this day, the freeway phantom was never caught.
Who was murdered and her body was left on 295. Unusual, yes, but it wasn't really a pressing matter to the police department.
In Boston, 1979, another horror. 11 black women were murdered over 5 months. Their bodies dumped in alleyways, lots, and parks across the Roxbury neighborhood. One white woman was also killed. She was the only one to make national headlines. Activists like the Combahee River Collective organized vigils, confronted police, and coined the phrase now etched into this movement: when black women go missing, no one notices.
I think is very important to their politics, which is identifying clearly the ways that black women are oppressed. And I think that that is a important contribution that the Combahee River Collective makes. The discussion about interlocking oppressions, how the way that black women experience oppression in our society cannot just be factored through the lens of race. It cannot just be factored through the lens of sexism or gender oppression. But we look at how those factors together create even new ways of understanding oppression.
The Boston Tried-Right murders, named after a store near one of the crime scenes, remained unsolved for years. For the black families left behind, the pain wasn't just lost, it was easier. A very poignant example of this easier is the story of Danette and Janet Millbrook. Augusta, Georgia, 1990. The 15-year-old twins vanished on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. They had visited their godmother, walked to the local gas station to buy snacks, walking near their home. It was a short, familiar route, but they never made it back. Their mother, Mary Miss Louise Sturgis, knew something was wrong immediately. The girls were responsible, close-knit, and not the type to disappear without warning. That night, she rushed to report them missing. But the response from police was devastatingly predictable. She was told to wait 24 hours.
Look, and nothing happened. All we get is hearsay.
By the time authorities took action, crucial hours had already passed. The case was assigned to a lone officer who, from the beginning, seemed convinced the girls had run away. He conducted a few interviews, gathered no forensic evidence, and then, less than a year later, closed the case based on a single unconfirmed tip that the girls had been seen entering a car. There was no name, no license plate, no witness confirmation, yet that was enough for the system. In 1993, just 3 years after they vanished, the Millbrook twins were removed from the National Missing Persons Registry, removed as if they had never existed.
First question out her mouth, asked him, did he know where my sister now was? And he said, I think they did.
Their case sat dormant for over 2 decades. No follow-up, no detectives assigned, no media coverage, even family inquiries were ignored. Shanta, their younger sister, put it plainly.
Mom was 35 years old when my sister then went missing. My mom is finna be 69 years old.
It wasn't until 2013, after relentless pressure from Shanta and national interest sparked by a podcast, that the sheriff's office reopened the case. The new sheriff, Richard Roundtree, Georgia's first black sheriff, publicly admitted the injustice.
Even though he reopened this cold case in 2013, Sheriff Richard Roundtree is now taking a stronger look into the disappearance of Jeanette and Danette Millbrook.
The individual working that case inadvertently closed the case for whatever reason, and the case shouldn't have been closed.
2 black girls gone without a trace, forgotten by the very people meant to find them. But this wasn't the case for everyone, not even close. Let's rewind just a few years to December 20th, 1984. Greeley, Colorado. 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews disappeared from her home after singing at a Christmas concert. When her father returned from work, Jonelle was gone. That same night, a full police investigation began. Within days, the FBI was involved. President Ronald Reagan even mentioned Jonelle by name in a national address.
Well over 1 million American children disappear from their homes or neighborhoods every year, causing, as we can all understand, heartbreaking anguish. Parents cry out for help, many through letters to me. For example, I learned about Jonelle Matthews of Greeley, Colorado, who would have celebrated a happy 13th birthday with her family just last month.
Jonelle's photos was the first to appear on milk cartons across the country, marking the beginning of a nationwide awareness campaign for missing children. Her disappearance dominated headlines. News stations provided regular updates. Her parents appeared on television, pleading for answers. Communities held candlelit vigils. Schools paused to honor her. For years, Colorado searched. In 2019, her remains were discovered buried in a rural oil field. The story reignited. In 2022, Stephen Pankey was convicted of her murder, bringing long-awaited justice.
Police say they found the skull belonging to a missing 12-year-old at an oil and gas site in Weld County, and they also found some of the clothes that she was wearing on the day that she went missing, which was 34 years ago.
The discovery helped them quickly identify the remains of Jonelle Matthews, who was last seen in December of 1984.
But Jonelle wasn't the only white child whose disappearance reshaped American law enforcement. Just 5 years later, in 1989, 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling was abducted while riding bikes with his brother and a friend near their home in St. Joseph, Minnesota. The entire country stopped. Within hours, a massive search began. The FBI joined the investigation immediately. His name was broadcast nationally. Billboards went up. School children across the country wore Jacob bracelets. Media ran daily updates. The search lasted 27 years. Jacob's remains were discovered in 2016. His abductor confessed and was sentenced to prison.
Jacob Wetterling's family confronted his kidnapper and killer in court today, giving emotional, heartfelt testimony.
The judge sentenced 53-year-old Danny Heinrich to 20 years in prison for receiving child pornography. After serving his time, Heinrich will be on supervised release and must register as a sex offender. That punishment is part of a plea deal in exchange for confessing and finally leading investigators to Jacob's remains.
In response, the federal government passed the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act, a landmark law requiring all states to implement sex offender registries. Now, compare that to Danette and Jeanette, two black girls, same age range, disappeared in 1990. No national coverage, no FBI, no milk cartons, no policy reform, no one held accountable. As late as 2012, their mother was still placing missing flyers on lampposts by herself. The Millbrook twins were not exceptions. They were the rule. During the 1970s and 1980s, countless black girls went missing from cities like Chicago, Baltimore, and Los Angeles. Most were quickly labeled runaways. The label ended the search before it began. Why did the system leap into action for Jonelle and Jacob but fall silent for Danette and Jeanette? It wasn't just about race. It was the belief that black children were less innocent, less in need of protection. White kids went missing. They were victims. Black kids blamed. That bias shaped not just public sympathy, but policy. Even the Amber Alert, launched in the 90s, carried those marks. When black girls vanished in the 2000s, alerts often came too late, if they came at all. By the 1980s, the evidence wasn't just anecdotal. Black girls and women were going missing in disturbing numbers across America's cities, and still, the system looked away. South Los Angeles, mid-1980s. Women were vanishing. Young, black, vulnerable. Some were later found murdered and discarded in alleys or abandoned buildings. The community was afraid. The pattern was unmistakable. There was a serial killer. But the Los Angeles Police Department didn't seem to care. Activist Margus Prescott, disturbed by the growing list of deaths, confronted LAPD officials. She was told not to worry.
Yes, well, I'll have to say, Dominique, that the work on the serial murders of Black women in South LA began. I founded the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders in the mid-1980s. Maybe you were just a little girl then, right? And it began after my daughter was a little girl, and I was vacuuming the floor, watching television, and saw the head of LAPD announce that 11 women were all victims of a serial murder in South Los Angeles. I couldn't believe my ears because I couldn't think of any other community where they would wait until 11 women are dead before they announce anything to the public. And so it all began there. And actually, Lonnie Franklin is dubbed the Grim Sleeper, and I'll say something about that name because it's not quite right. It was based on the fact that they thought he had stopped killing and started again, but we now know that he had continued killing, and it was a name established by media outlet, and it was very catchy. It caught on. But there were others of them as well. There was Hughes, there was Crane, there was Siebert, including Lonnie Franklin. And it's just shocking, Dominique, when one white blonde goes missing student in Aruba, the whole world knows about it. And here we have, and this number may be shocking to a lot of people, over 200 Black women who have been victims of serial murders or who are missing and presumed to be victims. And it's like, who cares? Hardly anybody knows about it.
Prescott wasn't the only one outraged. Families of the victims knew these women were more than the labels. Mothers, sisters, daughters. They formed their own search groups, held press conferences, marched for visibility because the city wasn't listening. In 2010, Lonnie Franklin Jr., later dubbed the Grim Sleeper, was arrested.
For decades, he eluded the police, but today I'm proud to announce that this terror has finally come to an end. Thanks to the recent use of DNA evidence, and even more importantly, 2 decades of exhaustive detective work, 25 years of reviewing and re-examining evidence, tapes, and witness accounts, we have our suspect. Yesterday, the LAPD arrested Lonnie David Franklin Jr., the man suspected of killing at least 10 young women in South Los Angeles.
He had murdered at least 10 Black women over 25 years. Authorities had long suspected a serial killer was operating in the area, but they never issued a warning to the community. Why? Because the victims weren't considered worthy of protection? If these women had lived in Brentwood or Beverly Hills, would the LAPD have waited 25 years? This wasn't just apathy, it was bias. The presumption that Black women who disappeared were complicit in their fate. Prescott later said,
and I can't even think, it's incomprehensible to think that there would be any other community except an impoverished one, except a Black community or community of color, or maybe on a Native American reservation where you have Native American women missing and murdered women as well, where you would have that many women being killed, that many folks going around praying on women and this not being a crisis, for the whole city. And that's one of the reasons that we want to work on this memorial, a permanent memorial that will give dignity to the lives of these women. You can't bring these women back.
The same bias surfaced in smaller cities. Take the case of Shamika Cozy. In 2008, 16-year-old Shamika went to visit her cousins in Berkeley, Missouri. She never came back. Her mother, Paula Hill, immediately reported her missing. Police said not to worry. Shamika had probably run off with a boyfriend. They refused to issue an Amber Alert.
They not doing anything because they think she gone on her own. I don't know what to do.
Shamika had no history of running away. Her bed was made, clothes untouched, phone silent, and yet officers called her a runaway within hours. No search, no media coverage, no urgency. It's now been over 15 years. Shamika is still missing. Her mother keeps a missing persons flyer taped to her front door, faded with time.
They tell us the case is still active and recently calls are coming in.
2 weeks ago, we got a call. And we're going to follow up on any and all leads that we get.
Hill and her other daughters have submitted DNA samples to a national registry, praying the records give them a match.
This is her at the family reunion.
Paula Hill gets through the day with a broken heart. But in the time we spent with her, she smiled and laughed the most when she took us through these precious photos of her missing daughter.
Spirit Day. I just need to keep her face out there. I don't want anyone to forget that she's still missing.
Because you certainly haven't forgotten.
Nope.
But by then, a new tool was supposed to help kids like Shamika, the Amber Alert system, created in 1996, designed to find children quickly. But for Black children, it didn't always work that way. Amber Hangerman was a 9-year-old white girl abducted and murdered in Texas in 1996. Her case led to the creation of the Amber Alert, a rapid response system that issues public alerts for abducted children. The goal was noble, the execution not so equal. To trigger an Amber Alert, law enforcement needs clear signs of abduction, belief the child is in intimate danger, and enough descriptive information, like a suspect or a vehicle. But when Black kids go missing, especially Black girls, they're more than likely to be labeled as runaways, which means no alert, no urgency.
According to census data, nearly 40% of missing persons in the United States are persons of color, yet African Americans make up only 13% of the population.
This evening, local and national advocates held a virtual forum to raise awareness about the thousands of women and children that go missing every year.
9 out of 10 Black girls who go missing are initially classified as runaways. 9 out of 10. And once labeled that way, they're disqualified from receiving an Amber Alert. Take the case of Jolie Musa. In January 2018, the 16-year-old disappeared from her home in Alexandria, Virginia. Her family knew something was wrong. She had left her phone and jacket.
Communicate all the time, like all the time. So the fact that I haven't heard anything from my child, that's not normal. That's not normal at all.
But police insisted she was a runaway. It took 3 days before they began investigating. 2 weeks later, Jolie's body was found in a wooded park. She had been murdered. Her parents believe if an Amber Alert had been issued immediately, Jolie might still be alive. Sadly, she wasn't alone. A 2022 congressional hearing revealed the stark numbers. Black children make up 33% of missing child cases, but only 7% of media references. The alerts were supposed to save lives, but for many Black families, they were never even issued. It wasn't until 2023 that California responded directly to this crisis. That year, lawmakers introduced the Ebony Alert, a first-of-its-kind system detected to missing Black youth and women. Senator Stephen Bradford put it bluntly.
The Ebony Alert is very specific. It deals with individuals from 12 to 25, whereas the Amber Alert is only 17 years and younger. It also specifies individuals who are known to have some kind of physical or mental challenges. That's part of what would trigger it as well. Are individuals who disappeared under suspicious circumstances and might be suspected of being sex trafficked or abducted. So those are the three triggering qualifications for the Ebony Alert.
The Ebony Alert aimed to fill the gap because even when Black parents reported a child missing, too often they were told the same thing. She'll come back. They always do. But sometimes they didn't. And the silence that followed was the deadliest part. The cases also happens in foster care. Rila Wilson is one of such victims. She was just 4 years old when she vanished. Born into hardship in 1996, Rila was placed under the care of Florida's Department of Children and Families. She entered foster care, a system designed to protect children like her. But in early 2001, Rila disappeared, and no one noticed, not for 15 months. A caseworker had failed to visit the home. Reports were forged. The agency had no idea she was missing. By the time authorities realized it, Rila was long gone, presumed dead. Her caregiver was eventually charged with murder, but the evidence was circumstantial. Her body was never found. The outrage sparked statewide reforms. Florida passed the Rila Wilson Act, mandating early education attendance and stricter caseworker oversight, but the damage was done. And Rila wasn't alone. Her case was simply the one that got noticed. As the foster care pipeline frayed, predators were paying attention. By the early 2000s, sex trafficking in the U.S. was reaching epidemic levels. And Black girls, especially those with unstable housing or foster backgrounds, were among the most targeted. Despite making up only 13% of the U.S. population, Black women and girls account for nearly 40% of confirmed sex trafficking victims.
This has definitely opened a way and opened more of a conversation and awareness about this national epidemic of Black women and girls missing at a very alarming rate.
The cycle is vicious. A Black teen girl runs from a group home. She disappears. Police mark her as a runaway. No alert goes out. No search party forms. Meanwhile, traffickers move quickly, exploiting the window before anyone even starts looking. By the time the system reacts, she's already gone. This perception gap decides who gets saved and who gets forgotten. Behind every missing girl is a family changed forever. A mother sleeping near the phone, a sibling posting flyers year after year, a father losing faith in the very institutions meant to protect. Take Tamika Houston. In 2004, the 24-year-old disappeared from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Her aunt, Rebecca Howard, a public relations expert, was stunned by the silence. She reached out to national media. No response.
Or to just watch the coverage that we've seen over the years, you would think there was like an epidemic of young missing white women in this country. And for I think a number of years, particularly the cable networks, they found a formula that worked. And they saw when they covered these cases like a Natalie Holloway or a Lacey Peterson, and we saw it really recently with Gabby Petito. When they covered these cases like they were soap operas with constant updates and little twists and turns, they saw, people were engaging online, people were tuning into these stories, so that worked for them, and they kept doing it. Which is, I always say, those women, their families, miss them and love them just as much as I love Tamika. They certainly deserve their stories to be told, but not to the exclusion of my niece and other women and girls who look like Tamika.
Tamika was beautiful, educated, loved, but the networks didn't call back. Then, just weeks later, a white woman went missing in Georgia. That woman's case, which turned out to be a hoax, made headlines for days.
A roadblock that I ran into, and I think there was a naivete on my part when my beautiful niece went missing, and I knew that my background is in PR. I had the media contacts, I had the skill set, I knew what to do, but I was met with silence, and I wasn't getting any phone calls back. Like, I was shocked. Again, I think I was naive and thinking like, hey, I see these stories out here. Surely my niece's, Tamika's story is just as engaging and people will care, but they did not.
Only after Tamika's remains were found and her ex-boyfriend charged did national media mention her name. But by then, it was too late. Her family turned pain into purpose. Tamika's story inspired the launch of the Black and Missing Foundation.
One of the positive things to come out of Tamika's disappearance, and I know Erica touched upon it, was the Black and Missing Foundation. I remember one of my goals at the time was to start a foundation in Tamika's name.
Founded in 2008 by Derica and Natalie Wilson, the organization is dedicated to closing the racial gap in missing persons coverage. They help families navigate media, law enforcement, and search operations. Their motto, help us find us. And they're not alone. There's Toni Jacobs, the mother of 21-year-old Keisha Jacobs. Keisha disappeared in Richmond, Virginia in 2016. She told her mom she'd be back the next day. She never returned. Toni launched rallies, pressured police, founded an awareness foundation. She kept hope alive even when the investigation stalled. In 2023, police finally confirmed what Toni had long feared. Keisha was no longer alive. Her case was reclassified, but Toni's mission didn't end. She now helps other families, offering guidance, organizing events, fighting to ensure no one else feels as alone as she once did. And then there's Phoenix Coden, a 23-year-old college student who vanished in St. Louis in 2011. Her SUV was found running, door open. Police dragged their feet. Media ignored it. Her parents, Godia and Lawrence, spent their life savings hiring private investigators.
For like a year and a half, that Phoenix left our driveway. It was December 18th, 2011, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Phoenix pulled out of our driveway at the house that she picked out for us to live in after we came from California to St. Louis. We no longer live in that house because her dad and I, made a decision after Phoenix left our driveway and we didn't hear from her that we had to do something ourselves to find Phoenix. And the biggest chunk of money that goes out is your house note, right? So we decided that we were not going to pay Wells Fargo, that we were going to use that money to look for our daughter because our experience with the St. Louis County Police was not very good.
They went on TV. They pleaded for help. They investigated leads themselves. Phoenix has never been found, but her story lives on because her parents refused to stay silent. Over and over again, it is families that keep the search going, not the system, not the press, not even the law. The heartbreak doesn't end when the case goes cold. For families of missing Black women and girls, it never even properly begins. They are left not only with unanswered questions, but with the burden of doing the work that police, media, and the state often won't. This act is not just about mere statistics. It's about the people who never stop searching, the mothers, sisters, and fathers who turn pain into protest and grief into relentless advocacy. Their names are rarely in the news, but their fight is the backbone of this untold history. Chicago, July 6, 2001. It was a quiet summer day on the South Side when 10-year-old Tionda Bradley and her 3-year-old sister Diamond disappeared from their home. Their mother, Tracy Bradley, left them briefly that morning to go to work. She called to check in. No answer. By the time she returned, the girls were gone. There was no forced entry, no struggle, just a mystery note from Tianda, supposedly saying they went to the store and to the park.
Found a note on a chair saying that me and Diamond went to the school and went to the store.
But the language didn't sound like a 10-year-old. Police launched what would become one of the largest manhunts in Chicago's history. For days, helicopters circled, volunteers combed parks, and investigators interviewed neighbors. But the urgency faded. The case turned cold. Tracy and her sister, Sheila Bradley Smith, never gave up. They held vigils every year, pushed for age-progressed photos, took polygraphs to clear suspicions, appealed for help from everyone, from local clergy to even Oprah.
Been put into this. I'm going to ask you point blank, do you know what happened to your kids?
No, I would have told you. I want justice for it. For 21 years of suffering. Couldn't go outside without somebody saying, they're gonna miss Bradley. She had something to do with them kids being missing. And I'm strong and I'm better.
But as the months turned into years, the family watched public attention shift elsewhere. Other cases filled headlines. Their girls remained missing. They never stopped believing the girls were out there.
And family and friends are honoring Diamond and Tianda Bradley. Today marks 23 years since the sisters disappeared. Tonight, a large group gathered at Taylor Park on Chicago's South Side to say a prayer for Diamond and Tianda. They were 3 and 10 years old when they disappeared from their Bronzeville apartment in 2001.
We still praying and continue on praying and having hope that Diamond and Tianda return back home to our family and friends.
I just wish they was here to even see my kids or to be older to have kids. And I just love them and miss them so much.
We love you! We love you!
The family clings to faith. Faith that the girls might still be alive. That someone, somewhere, knows what happened. That the system, which initially dismissed critical clues and failed to preserve the scene, will eventually bring them answers. But for every door the Bradleys knocked on, another family was just beginning their own nightmare. They weren't just grieving mothers, they became institutions in their own right. For families like the Coldens, the Jacobs, and countless others, the grief of losing a child to disappearance was crushing. But instead of surrounding to silence, they channeled their heartbreak into a higher purpose. They built what the system never offered them: networks of support, movements of accountability, and foundations of hope. Toni Jacobs, after losing her daughter Keisha in 2016, became a lifeline to families who were walking the same impossible road. With no formal background in advocacy, she founded the Keisha Jacobs Foundation, hosted Richmond's annual Missing Persons Day, and turned her voice into a megaphone for those the system ignored.
In preparation for Missing and Unidentified Persons Month in May, Missing Persons Day was held in South Richmond today at Broad Rock Park. People of all ages having a good time. For the 8th year, Toni Jacobs has spearheaded the celebration. Her daughter Keisha disappeared in September of 2016 and was declared deceased by police after detectives got a confession, but her remains have never been found. Jacobs says days like today are always difficult.
Even when her own son was murdered just months after Keisha vanished, Toni didn't retreat. She doubled down. Her strength became the scaffolding for other mothers barely holding it together. She didn't just search for her daughter, she fought for everyone else's too. In the case of Tamika Houston, whose disappearance barely registered in national media, it was the silence that sparked the movement. Watching Tamika's story disappear while white counterparts dominated headlines, Derica and Natalie Wilson decided enough was enough. They fused law enforcement expertise with PR strategy to form the Black and Missing Foundation.
The biggest misconception is these missing individuals are thugs or criminals, and we want the world to know that they are valuable members of our community. They are our mothers and fathers, our children that are disappearing at an alarming rate, and we can no longer turn a blind eye to this issue
What started as an act of protest has become a national force. BAMFI doesn't just find the missing. They train families, rewrite media narratives, and advocate for policy changes. They've recovered hundreds of people. But perhaps more importantly, they've changed how America talks about who is worth finding. Others follow suit. Phoenix Coden's disappearance led her parents to not only mortgage their home and fund their own investigation, but also push for accountability in media coverage and missing persons protocols. Each step these families took, from organizing vigils to confronting mayors, from launching hotlines to running digital databases, turned mourning into momentum. They couldn't get justice the traditional way, so they built their own way. And in doing so, they created a blueprint for every family who refuses to let their missing loved one vanish without a fight. Sometimes change starts with one person and a laptop. In 2018, journalist Erica Marie Rivers launched Our Black Girls, a website dedicated entirely to telling the stories of missing and murdered Black women and girls. The concept was radical in its simplicity. What if we refused to let Black women disappear without a trace?
Rivers says she combs through government websites for missing women and children to find these stories. To date, Our Black Girls has more than 560 entries.
Somebody deserves recognition from our mainstream media, and that wasn't happening with Black women. That's not happening with Black girls.
Erica was tired of scrolling through social media and seeing missing person flyers for Black girls that never made the news. She started researching each case, digging through local news, reading obituaries, calling families, and she wrote, profile by profile, she resurrected the stories of the forgotten.
Communities and in red line districts and in marginalized communities and Black communities, we don't have that a lot up for families. They don't have that sort of community or people that pay attention to what they're doing. We have people that have gone missing and have never had an article written about them.
Each post on Our Black Girls reads like a love letter and a reckoning. These are not statistics. They are women with families, laughter, pain, and dreams. Rivers doesn't sensationalize. She contextualizes. She tells you who they were, how they vanished, and why we should care. Because caring changes everything. When you care, you search. When you search, you find. As the internet evolved, so did the movement. In 2016, the hashtag Missing DC Girls exploded on Twitter. A string of disappearances in Washington, D.C., mostly Black and Latina teens, sparked outrage. The police claimed nothing unusual was happening, but the community saw a different truth. Social media gave voice to that concern, and for once, the noise worked. National media picked up the story. Politicians demanded answers. The outcry pressured local officials to allocate more resources to the missing persons unit. Other grassroots efforts have followed. Facebook groups now coordinate searches. TikTok users highlight cold cases. Instagram pages like Black and Missing Outreach share daily flyers, with reach that rivals traditional media. Offline, organizers host self-defense workshops, distribute flyers, and lobby for legislative reform. It's not just about finding missing people. It's about rewriting a cultural norm. One where no girl's disappearance is treated as routine. Sometimes even the darkest tragedy can spark change. In 2017, 19-year-old Ashanti Billy was abducted from a military base in Virginia and later found murdered. Her parents turned devastation into action.
The person or persons that decided they wanted to take our baby away from us and away from everyone that loved her, you're a coward. You didn't deserve to breathe the air that she breathed at all.
We say to everybody, stay encouraged. You know, this is not one of the outcomes that we all were seeking, but yet and still, we're staying to fight because once again, there are other young people that's still missing out here.
They fought for a new alert system, one that would apply to adults too old for Amber Alerts, but too young to simply vanish without a trace. By late 2018, Congress passed the Ashanti Alert Act. It created a national alert program for missing adults between ages 18 and 64.
Continuing to follow breaking news tonight, the Ashanti Alert is officially law now. President Donald Trump signed the legislation today. Congressman Scott Taylor announced the bill earlier this year. It honors Ashanti Billy. The 19-year-old was kidnapped from JEB Little Creek Fort Story and was later found dead last year in North Carolina.
It was a victory, but one of unbearable loss. These reforms rarely came from within the system. They came from the families that failed. And even with new laws, the heart of the movement remains the same. The people never stop searching. In city after city, everyday people are stepping up. In Baltimore, there's the Safe Sister Circle, offering legal aid to Black women at risk of domestic violence, a leading precursor to disappearances.
The Safe Sister Circle is a nonprofit that provides culture-specific, trauma-informed, and holistic services to Black women survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse, living primarily in DC's most marginalized communities of Ward 7 and 8. I'm here to introduce you to Circle Chats, a new initiative that we are starting at the Safe Sister Circle. What is Circle Chats? Circle Chats is an interview and educational show that has the goal of building awareness and the intersectionality of issues specifically faced by Black women survivors in DC's Ward 7 and 8.
In New York, the youth group Girls for Gender Equality runs peer workshops teaching Black girls how to recognize and resist trafficking tactics. In California, activists pushed through the 2023 Ebony Alert System to prioritize missing Black youth. They speak for the missing, the overlooked, and the erased. They speak for girls like Relesha Rudd, who vanished from a DC homeless shelter in 2014. For Akia Eggleston, a pregnant woman who went missing in Baltimore in 2017. For thousands of others whose name may never trend, but whose stories matter. What does it mean to never give up? It means pushing when the leads go cold. It means holding vigils when no cameras come. It means knowing that justice might never arrive, but choosing to fight anyway. For every family in this documentary and every grassroots warrior in this movement, that fight is daily. And it's not just about their daughter, it's about all our daughters. Because until every name is said, until every missing Black girl is seen, until the system values all lives equally, they will not stop. They will never stop. We often like to think of injustice as something that happened before we knew better, as though the failures we've explored in history are fixed now. Lessons learned, systems reformed, tragedies relegated to memory. But America's crisis of missing Black women and girls is not a thing of the past. It is happening now. Every week, new faces appear on flyers. New names enter national databases. New families begin a nightmare that too often ends in silence. Despite decades of advocacy, reform, and grassroots visibility, the pattern hasn't stopped. In many ways, it's evolved. Let's begin with a name that still haunts Washington, D.C. Relesha Tana Rudd was 8 years old. She lived with her mother and brothers in a homeless shelter inside a former D.C. hospital. It was 2014, and the shelter was managed by the city. It wasn't safe. Residents had long raised concerns about security lapses, staff misconduct, and child welfare risk. That's where Relesha met Khalil Tatum. Tatum wasn't a family friend. He wasn't a teacher or a neighbor. He was a 51-year-old janitor employed by the shelter. He began buying Relesha gifts, taking her on outings, spending time with her unsupervised. Staff knew, her mother knew, some believed he was helping the struggling family. No one intervened. By March 2014, Relesha stopped showing up at school. School officials say they received multiple excuses from her family, even a note claiming she was under a doctor's care.
People are asking the question, who failed Relisha? Who do you think failed Relisha?
Honestly, I think it's more that the government could have did. I think the school failed her too.
Why is that?
Because if they would have came out with a name from the start, something could have been done from the start.
If they would have what? I'm sorry?
Came out with the name of a doctor, something could have been started. Instead of them approaching my significant other as, tell Miss Young her doctor's called and she's clear, he could have approached it another way, but he didn't.
But the doctor turned out to be Khalil Tatum. Relisha had already been missing for weeks before anyone realized something was wrong. When police finally launched an investigation, they learned Tatum had taken the girl from the shelter. Surveillance footage captured them in hotels. He then vanished. A citywide manhunt followed. His wife was found shot to death. A week later, Tatum was discovered dead from a self-inflicted gun wound, but Relisha was gone. Her body was never found. The case shook the city. A child vanished from a government-run shelter, with signs, with warnings, with opportunities to intervene, and yet no one acted until it was too late. Her disappearance became a symbol of how systemic neglect, poverty, and implicit bias can intersect in deadly ways. She wasn't kidnapped from a playground or a suburban street. She disappeared within city care, surrounded by adults, watched by a system that never really saw her. As years passed, her face aged in digital renderings, but for many, Relisha Rudd never grew up, and she wasn't the only one. Chicago, October 2018. Kira Coles was 26. She worked as a U.S. Postal Service employee. She was 3 months pregnant, and she was excited about her future. Neighbors last saw her outside her apartment on the south side. Surveillance footage showed her walking past her car, and then nothing.
Started another life no one knew about, or being lured to a place of no return.
I'm thinking that she's walking to somebody's car, so all the video that they took off the block, that we'll be able to see exactly what car she got into and, possibly have a license plate.
Why would she be wearing her uniform if she's off work?
I was thinking maybe she decided to go back, maybe she decided to go in, or she just put the uniform on.
She never returned to work, never contacted family. Her phone stopped pinging. Her car was still parked at her apartment. Keys, purse, and lunch still inside. Her mother, Karen Phillips, immediately knew something was wrong, but police didn't act urgently. Despite her pregnancy, despite the sudden disappearance, Karen began organizing her own searches, going door to door, appearing on local news, posting Kira's photos across the city.
Very emotional. I had my breaking point this morning, but I'm okay now, but it's emotional every day. When you go from seeing your child every day to not seeing her for almost 3 years, could nobody out here imagine? They don't care because of her color.
The case remained cold for years. In 2022, new developments emerged suggesting police believe foul play was involved. Still, no arrest, no public suspects. Kira's case met every condition that should have sparked an all-hands search. A government employee, visibly pregnant, loved by her family, vanishing without explanation. But the system stalled. No Amber Alert, no national media blitz, no weekly updates. Karen Phillips has continued to push. She remains Kira's voice, but she's also exhausted. Yet, despite those plans, the urgency never came. In yet another Midwest city, another young woman disappeared. Her name was Raja McQueen. McQueen was 27 when she disappeared on June 26, 2021. She was last seen on surveillance video, leaving a gas station in Cleveland, Ohio. Footage showed her in her car, followed closely by a man in a hoodie who had reportedly been with her earlier.
She's missing, the car's missing, like she has not been home, like you didn't go to work, it's just like she just vanished.
2 hours later, her vehicle was seen again on camera, but this time she wasn't in it. The driver appeared to be trying to wipe down the seats. Police impounded the car. Blood was found, but no one was arrested.
All the way up until she's at that gas station. And then at 11:14, now there's a bullet hole in the car and she's not driving the car and she has not been seen heard from since or the car.
Raja's family sounded the alarm immediately. They described her as a loving daughter and devoted mother of 2 boys. She had no history of disappearing, and nothing about her behavior was typical. Still, the case stalled. Her mother, Sherry McQueen, said she felt the police is not doing anything because she is Black.
Black girl just missing. And I'm not saying no one is more important than the other because she's not the only person that's missing. I just want those resources that everybody else is getting to at least apply for her.
Unlike other high-profile cases that draw national attention and FBI assistance, Raja's case received little spotlight. It echoed what Black families across the country have said for years. If you want answers, prepare to become a detective. As of today, Raja remains missing. Her 2 sons still ask when she's coming home. Her mother keeps searching. In the system, it moves slowly, too slowly.
We would take her any way we can get her. We just want her to come home. I mean, it's tired. We're so tired of not knowing.
These aren't stories from the past. They are active cases. They are today's headlines that too few people are reading. Raja McQueen's family is still searching, still waiting, but their sorrow echoes across state lines. Where another mother began her own painful search for a teenage daughter who simply vanished on her way to school. It was July 15th, 2016. Lashaya Stein, 16, was a straight-A student from Aurora, Colorado. She was ambitious, with dreams of becoming a nurse. She was also deeply connected to her family, especially her mother, Sabrina Jones. That morning, Lashaya didn't show up for summer school. Security camera footage later captured her walking alone at 2 a.m. near Montview Boulevard, just blocks from her home. No one knows why she was out. That was the last confirmed sighting. Her mother was immediately alarmed. Lashaya hadn't taken her phone charger, makeup, or even extra clothes. She wasn't the type to run away. Something was wrong. Police initially treated her as a runaway. It took weeks for a dedicated investigation to begin. By then, crucial time had passed. Over the years, disturbing rumors emerged. Lashaya may have been trafficked. There were reported sightings in motel corridors and urban trafficking rings. Still, none led to a confirmed rescue. Sabrina Jones continues to fight. She organizes vigils, keep Lashaya's photos circulating, pushes law enforcement to take the case seriously.
Baby girl, it's mommy. I never thought in a million years that I would have to go a whole year without seeing your face, your smile, hearing your laugh. Whatever situation you're in, just know that we're waiting for you and we're looking for you and we won't stop. We won't stop. I promise you that until we get you back home. I need you to be strong. I'm going to pray for you every second of the day. And if someone is holding you either physically or mentally, I command you in the name of Jesus, let my baby go.
Today, Lashaya remains missing, but her name has become a rallying cry in Colorado, a reminder that the line between runaway and missing is too often decided by race and assumption. Lashaya's disappearance raises urgent questions about vulnerability in trafficking, and for another woman in Florida, the stakes were even higher. She was 6 months pregnant when she disappeared. February 18th, 2019, Jasmine Robinson was 23 and expecting her first child. She was last seen at her aunt's home in Archer, Florida, a small town just outside Gainesville. That evening, she spoke on the phone with a relative. Then she stepped outside and never returned.
7 months almost, that meant anything could happen to her or baby. She's out there and we don't know where she's at.
Her phone went dark, her social media silent. Her family immediately reported her missing. Jasmine was excited about the baby. She had a stable life. No reason to disappear. But police response was slow. Suspicion didn't fall on any particular person. There were no leads, no sightings, no camera footage, only silence. Over time, the case faded from headlines. No Amber Alert was ever issued. Because Jasmine was an adult, the injustice wasn't just in the loss. It was in the lack of urgency. Across the country, too many of these women vanish into a system that treats their stories like footnotes. Baltimore, 2017. Akia Elkelston was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared. She had a high-risk pregnancy, a baby shower scheduled that weekend, and a 1-year-old at home. Her apartment was found undisturbed except for her phone, wallet, and the crib she had just purchased. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. The father of her unborn child was questioned, but never charged. It wasn't until 2022, 5 years later, that he was arrested and charged with murder.
And time again, a young woman 8 months pregnant missing since 2017, but tonight, city prosecutors say there's been an arrest in the murder of Akia Eggleston.
That's right, WMER2 News' Kendall Green on the story tonight. Kendall, this probably doesn't help the family heal, but quite possibly giving them some answers that they've been waiting years for.
Akia's family had never stopped searching, but it took nearly half a decade for the system to act. In South Carolina, Alexis Ware disappeared in January 2022. The 29-year-old was last seen dropping off her children with their father. She was struggling with anxiety. Her family reported strange behavior in her final days. Her red Honda was later found in a wooded area, but no trace of Alexis and no real movement in the case. Her mother and brother continued to lead the search. These stories reflect not just individual loss, but collective neglect. Each disappearance is a mirror to a system still falling. If these cases have anything in common, it's not just race. It's the fight families had to endure just to be taken seriously, just to be heard, just to be seen. They had to become detectives, activists, publicists, and grief managers. While the rest of the world moved on, the crisis is not in the past. It is present, ongoing, unfolding, and it will continue until we decide that Black girls and women deserve more than just hashtags after they vanish. They deserve to be found. We followed the names, the faces, the heartbreak, from plantations to public housing, from forgotten archives to active case files. What ties these stories together isn't just tragedy, it's easier. Black girls and women don't just go missing. They're dismissed, misclassified, mislabeled, forgotten. And while families search, while mothers hold on to fading flyers and community activists shout into silence, one question remains. The truth is, it doesn't change until we force it to. That means questioning who gets headlines, who gets an alert, who gets a task force. It means pushing media, pressuring legislators, demanding accountability for every agency that treats Black lives as afterthoughts. But above all, it means refusing to look away. Share this documentary, say their names, keep their stories alive, follow and support organizations like the Black and Missing Foundation, Our Black Girls, and local grassroots movements. And if someone you know is missing, report it, push it, demand it to be taken seriously. Because until every missing Black girl is seen, heard, and found, none of us can afford to stay silent.